how do I explain this book? Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing my March wrap-up. Alright, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, did you have any books you couldn't finish this month? Because I had many. Yeah, I spent a lot of March clinging to the edge so that I did not fall into a reading slump. And you know, I really had some up and down times. I would have one book that would just totally reinvigorate me, and then I would pick up another book and my interest would plummet. Let's just go ahead and start off with my stats. This month I read 10 books, and across those I read 2,855 pages. That does include converting audiobook hours to pages, but in regards to audiobook hours, I read like roughly 12 hours that I can fully count. In terms of the books I actually finished and rated this month, I had a 4.15 average rating, and that's fantastic. But I had 4 DNFs, which isn't great. As for my genre breakdown, I read 3 fantasy books, 1 historical, 1 horror, 2 manga, 1 nonfiction, and 2 romance. Of the little goals I keep for myself, I did read a book that was more than 450 pages. I did read a nonfiction book. Unfortunately, I didn't get around to my comic this month, but that's not a huge deal. In terms of series, I started 1 series, I continued 3 series, and I finished 2. So as per usual, this is only the books that I read for March that weren't related to a video project. So starting out, let's talk about my DNFs. I started the month with The Little Shop of Found Things by Paula Braxton. This was actually the digital pick from my TBR jars, and I also borrowed it from Josh's mom, and unfortunately it just did not work for me. In this story, we are following a woman named Xaneth who has the ability to touch an object and see its entire history. She and her mom end up buying an antique shop together, and she finds this. I still don't remember what it was called, but it's basically an old school keychain for women. She's called to this object, and anytime she touches it, she discovers she time travels. Turns out, apparently there's a ghost within this antique shop pushing Xaneth to travel back into time and solve some sort of a mystery involving this ghost's daughter. I also know there's some sort of a romance in this. Basically, it's very reminiscent to Outlander. Historical, romance, mystery, all things I really enjoy, but just in this situation, it didn't work for me. Like I said, I borrowed this from my SO's mom, and she gave it 5 stars, so I did feel really bad that I didn't finish it, but the writing style just wasn't vibing with me. I really enjoy atmospheric writing. I love a book that's only here for vibes, but like I still need something. I didn't really care about our main character. I wasn't very intrigued by this mystery that was taking place, and the writing style itself just was a little too much. It was so flowery, it was so descriptive of the setting. At one point, I remember there was a page without a single paragraph break. That's a lot. I pushed through the first 100 pages, but it still wasn't engaging me with anything, so I officially put it down and gave it back. The one other book I DNF'd that I can talk about was unfortunately from my own physical shelves, and that was The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. I picked this up off of Haley Hughes' recommendations because I knew it was a thriller in which this woman is trying to steal another woman's life. It's an interesting setup, but I think even if the character is morally great, I still have to be able to root for her in some capacity, and I absolutely detested our main character in this, Amber. She was just the worst. At the beginning, I was intrigued by all of this drama. It was very reality TV sort of style, but eventually I just didn't care anymore. If you watched my weekly reading vlog, I went on a roller coaster ride with this book. I went up and down deciding, will I, won't I? Will I enjoy this? Will I not? Should I get rid of it? Should I not? And finally, after I don't even remember, I think I was over 200 pages in, and I just still did not care. I actually had a guess that whenever I went to look at spoilers, found out I was correct, and then figured out the twist that takes place in this book, and I don't really like that, and I'm very glad that I put this down now. After the 3rd time where I put this down and had no interest in returning to it, I realized I should give up. I should stop wasting my time. Did not help with the slump feeling. For the rest of these books, I am going to do my reviews in order of star rating. So to begin with, I read Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. This is a sci-fi novella that I listened to the audiobook of. How do I explain this book? We're following Kev, who was born during the LA riots, and also his sister Ella, who has some sort of supernatural abilities. And we're seeing how Kev struggles just being a black man in America, and Ella struggles with trying to control her powers and decide how she should best use them. It was an interesting idea, and the layout of the story was interesting as well. I understood what the author was doing. I got the points they were bringing up. I just don't know if in the end I really enjoyed reading this book. We alternate between the perspectives of Kev and Ella, which I think in doing that should allow us to connect with both of these characters. However, I felt far stronger about Kev than I ever felt about Ella. The narrative around his experience with police as a child, to his incarceration, to his rehabilitation, all of that, I thought the conversation around it was very well nuanced and poignant. I cared so much about Kev. I found myself tearing up while we were in his perspective, not only seeing him experience these terrible injustices, but also in his struggle with his feelings and relationship with Ella. I felt as though his emotions were very well woven into the writing, and you could always feel this anger that was just simmering beneath the surface. One of the big things that has affected their relationship is that while Kev is in prison, Ella could so easily free him, but she doesn't. She has these powers, and they're never really completely explained, and every single time we see from her perspective, it's as though she's found a new power. Because of all of that, she is insanely strong, but she's obviously not strong enough to protect her brother from the systematic oppression and abuse he is experiencing. Throughout her perspective, we watch as Ella learns more about her abilities and really struggles to find herself. We see as she learns about the terrible atrocities that Black people experience, whether they're members of her community or members of her family itself, whether those terrible things come from police, from doctors, or from the prison system. However, I just never felt like Ella herself was a fully fleshed out character to foil how well created Kev was. Instead, she sort of seemed like a device utilized to showcase all of the terrible things that were happening in this society to tie into the underlying message. That's not to say that the pain we see Ella experience and feel is any less gut-wrenching. By the end of this novella, I just kind of felt like the story itself was unfinished. I think it's emotionally impactful. I think it had a strong message. It just didn't feel like it wrapped up to be a cohesive story by the end. So that's why I came out to 3 stars. There are certain elements of the story I really enjoyed, but given that more than 50% of it, I just had a hard time connecting to the main character. It really detracted from my enjoyment, but I definitely think this is something you should check out. It's a fairly short audiobook, and like I said, it does do some interesting things in the discussions, in the timeline, but just wasn't a favorite for me. When I was trying desperately to throw myself back into reading, I thought a good way to do that would be to let my TBR jar pick a random book for me. You know, it worked out very perfectly that I started Soul Eater by 𝗖cie RH𝘁𝗁. This is a manga that was the basis for one of my all-time favorite animes, and a series I've been interested in getting into for quite a while now. It's a little hard to explain this series. It seems very complicated, but once you get settled, it's really not. In this world, there are individuals who work for the Shinigami Lord Death, and those individuals can attend a school where they train to either become a Meister or a weapon. This is Soul. He literally turns into this weapon, and he is wielded by his Meister, Maka. Obviously, in this case, he is a scythe. There are different kinds of weapons as well, but in order to become a death scythe, they have to kill 99 evil souls and 1 witch's soul. You also follow 2 other sets of Meisters and weapons, and you see the ridiculous adventures they go on to try and become a fully fledged Meister and weapon, but also they end up getting embroiled into a lot bigger plot. Seeing as how I've watched the anime many a times, I adore this crew of characters. Black Star, one of the other Meisters, is sort of the worst, but in a kind of lovable way. I think because I already loved all of them so much, it was very easy for me to slip into the story. In this first volume, we're introduced introduced to the main 3 teams that we're going to be following. We are introduced to how the world itself works. And then we have wacky side characters and the strange adventures they get on while trying to, you know, collect all of these souls. Even in this first one, the art itself actually improves chapter by chapter, which I definitely love seeing. And the more we see of the world in every chapter, the stranger and kookier it gets, but that fits so perfectly with the story. I'm also not sure if I ever picked up on the multiple different pop culture references when watching the anime, but thank you to the translator notes for letting me catch on to that. I think it made some of them just more entertaining. I will say, this does have fan service. This is technically considered like an older teen manga. There are a few jokes that you read them and you realize like, ooh, that's showing when this was originally created. But all in all, I still really enjoyed this. I loved getting set into the world, meeting all our characters, so I had to give this one 4 stars to start out the series, and I cannot wait to continue, even though this is a 25 volume long series, so this is gonna take a while and probably become a little expensive. The next 4-star, which really is the book I'm crediting with getting me out of my slump, was The Wrath of Wolves by Kelly York and Rowan Altwood. This is the next book in the Dark as the Night series, in which we are following Benji and Preston, 2 new characters who we met in the first book. So this series is an amalgamation of historical, paranormal mystery with romance, and I love all of it. It all comes together so beautifully. I think the authors have done a phenomenal job. Already, I am absolutely obsessed with Preston and Benji. Found out apparently there are plans for 2 more books, and I cannot wait to see more of them. Like I said, in this one we are following Preston and Benji, who are pretending to be the characters from the first 2 books, James and William, while they carry this paranormal object from England all the way to San Francisco. Unfortunately for them, things get a little dangerous along the way. The authors really know how to balance all of these genres and mix them together so perfectly. There is a well-created historic atmosphere, which in this one is set in America, helping it to stand out from the previous 2 books. The mystery got my heart racing, definitely pulled me to the edge of my seat at times. The ghosts also make things nice and creepy, and then the slow burn romance in this one is just so swoony and so freaking adorable. Across the board, I just really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fantastic installment, and like I said, I can't wait to see more. I think a big part of why I love Preston and Benji so much is because they're such great friends, and they're both terrified of taking the step to make things more serious because they don't know if their affections will be returned in the same way. They're so protective of one another, almost to a fault, and in that situation, they actually talked out why that was a problem. It just felt so healthy and mature. Even though they can't really admit their feelings to each other for most of this book, they find such comfort in the other person, making the relationship already feel incredibly intimate. I won't lie, I miss James and Will from the first 2 books, but came to love these 2 just as much. With a story that has a big part being travel, it's very easy to get bored, but surprisingly, that never really happened. There's stalking, chases, kidnapping, ghost hunting. There's plenty of things to keep you engaged throughout. And by the end of this, we find out that both teams may have stumbled upon something way, way bigger than previously realized. Again, I want the next book and I want it now. Like I said, I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it as well. Highly recommend checking the series out because honestly, it needs more love. I'm gonna slide this next book in here even though I haven't quite finished it, but at this point, this is sort of my expected rating, so if it's not right, editing that will put that on the screen. I'm currently in the middle of Fevered Sun by Rebecca Rowanhorse. This is the next book in the Between Earth and Sky series, which I always have a really hard time describing. This world is based on pre-Columbian American civilizations. We are following a group of people who come from different sides of the society who are all slowly coming to converge in a possibly dangerous situation. In the first book, we are following 𝗖cie, who is a teak reminiscent to a mermaid and a pirate captain who is tasked with taking this mysterious blind man into the main city of Tova. The blind man's name is Serapio, and he's got a history and I love him so dearly, but I also don't know how to feel about things. Then we are also following Narampa, who is currently the Sun Priest and the head of the Watchers, which is this group sort of similar to a government that runs the main city of Tova, where majority of the story revolves around. There's political scheming, there's religious discourse, there is action, there is romance. Like I've really enjoyed this series, but like I just never know how to talk about it. So obviously this is the sequel. It continues off of Black Sun, and thus far I like it, but it really does feel like this book has suffered a little bit from middle book syndrome, because it really seems like we're just seeing everything that has happened in response to the events at the end of the first book. There isn't a ton of action. Thus far, it definitely is more focused on the political scheming that is taking place. It's really amping up the struggle to decide who is in the right and who is in the wrong, because there is so much backstabbing and scheming, and it's so well done in that regard, but it's just not nearly as fun and engaging as the first book was. We're also getting a little bit more of a character who we saw a little bit of in the first book, 𝗖cie, who is he is the head of the military for one of the clans in the city of Tova. I currently have maybe 140 pages left of this, so there is still plenty of time for more adventurous things to take place, but at this point my estimated rating is about a 4-star. I'm enjoying this. It's keeping me engaged. I'm never bored, but it's just not as exciting as the first book. However, I am really interested to see how things are going to all wrap up in the third. The single 4.5 I have this month is Soul Eater Volume 2. In this one, we get a more formal introduction into the school where these meisters and weapons go. We get to meet some of the teachers, including my absolute favorite Stein, who is insane, but he's my fave. I love him. He's so weird, he's really unsettling, and there's this ongoing chair gag that gets me every single time. And this is the one where we really get started into the main plot of the series, which I am a little surprised at because it feels like so little has really happened, but yet it is a long plot that obviously 𝗖cie has really set out, and so it needs the time to develop all of these things. We do get a little bit of an introduction into an interesting character, Krona. A little less fan service and no more questionable jokes, which is why this one got bumped up to a 4.5 stars, but overall I would not be surprised if a lot of the series ends up coming out to 5 stars. Oh, we also see some development of our Meister and weapon combos, which is great because really Black Star needs it. This is Black Star, by the way. He's a character. Finally, my favorite book of the month, and the 1 5-star I had. I wasn't even planning to pick up this book. It was totally just random. I was still struggling with what I wanted to read, and nothing on my TBR at the time sounded good to pick up via audio. So I just went to my Goodreads. I knew I needed to listen to a nonfiction book, so I was like, all right, what's the shortest? What sounds kind of interesting? So I picked up You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey by Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. Oh my god, this book was so good, guys. Definitely recommend the audio because Amber is freaking hilarious, and the tone she puts into all of the stories, Lacey's dry cracks that go on, they really added to the entire storytelling process. This is basically a bunch of ridiculous short stories explaining stupid, microaggressive, shockingly racist situations that unfortunately Lacey Lamar has experienced. Like I said, some of them are microaggressive, some of them are based on implicit bias, and then some of them are just plain stupid. Even though the things these women are talking about are obviously bad things, it's one of those situations where like you gotta laugh to keep from crying about these sorts of things existing, turn them into what is a very hilarious book that I really enjoyed. I've already recommended this to a few different people in my life. My jaw definitely dropped more than once listening to some of these stories because I just cannot believe how stupid people are, how racist people are, how they think some of these things are perfectly okay to say or do. But again, the storytelling element makes everything just hilarious. There's a specific story that I cannot get over. I've reiterated it to everyone in my everyday life because it's hilarious. I'm just gonna say Africa is hot and leave it at that. Please read this book. 5-star of the month. I couldn't give it anything less. Alright y'all, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!